Well, good morning, everyone. We are going to talk about positive mental health for children and adults today. My name is Lisa Kazarik. I'm one of the special education coordinators for the Fairbanks North Starborough School District. And I have with me my wonderful co-presenter, Anna Zerfus, and she is a parent navigator and mentor coordinator for the Stone Soup Group. So our learning objectives this morning: what is mental health? We're going to talk a little bit about trauma and grief. We have a few things about recognizing stress and how it reacts with the brain, and then just some strategies to help along the way.
Today, we're going to be talking about mental health and well-being, not to be confused with mental illness. Many factors can contribute to mental health issues. So things like biological factors, such as our genes and our brain chemistry, life experiences such as trauma, abuse, or even the worldwide event that we just went through. Family history of mental health issues can also be a link to some of those problems. It is our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, how we feel, and how we act. It helps determine how we handle the stress that we're exposed to, how we relate to other people, and how we make choices and what choices we make. Mental health is as important as physical health at every stage of life, from childhood and adolescence through adulthood. Positive mental health allows people to realize whatever their potential is, or what they think it is, or whatever dreams they want to do. It helps them cope with the stresses of life, especially those everyday stresses that we all deal with. It helps them work productively and make meaningful contributions to their families, themselves, and their communities. Now, speaking of that giant worldwide trauma that we all went through of the pandemic, we thought we should discuss some of the specifics of trauma and how it can affect mental health. So the general definition of trauma is a deeply distressing or disturbing event. That's the very basic definition of trauma. There are 3 types of mental and emotional trauma. Those can be acute, chronic, or complex. So acute trauma occurs usually from a single incident. So think of things like a car accident, or something like, you get mugged, and it happens once in your life. That would be an acute trauma. Chronic trauma is repeated and prolonged exposure, such as domestic violence or other abuse. Complex trauma is exposure to varied and multiple traumatic events, often of an invasive interpersonal nature, and can affect the mental and physical health of the survivor. Now, there are factors that can influence the intensity of how the trauma is felt or perceived by the person who is in it. Characteristics of the person affected, the trauma exposure, and the post-trauma experience. So some characteristics of the person affected: have they had a trauma before? Did they learn appropriate coping skills or maladaptive coping skills? And then the trauma exposure, is it a one-time thing? Was it interpersonal? Was it emotional? Was it physical? It just all depends. And then the post-trauma experience, did they lock it all away? And then it's going to come out and, in maladaptive behaviors like drug addiction or alcohol addiction. Or did they get help and process that trauma? So did they build the tools for resiliency? Now, we often see signs of mental health in children, both good and not so good. Now, in infants, they can't really tell us what they're feeling. They can't tell us what's happening other than crying, maybe having physical manifestations like rashes or things like that. But they will have biological disruptions. So they might have frequent and prolonged crying. They may be completely unresponsive to soothing. They may have feeding disturbances, or they may have sleep issues. They could also have, on the other end of the spectrum, complete withdrawal, lack of social responsiveness, and then somatic problems like diarrhea, vomiting, and weight loss. Then in toddlers, we have that fight or flight response. They can be, either accident prone because they're always going out and they're looking for more exposure, or we can be on the other side where they completely avoid exploration altogether. And they are finally old enough to start thinking to themselves. They're starting to be aware of their own thoughts, and they can start blaming themselves for events such as family violence. Then in school age children, we have all of those plus some. They may have those feelings of responsibility and guilt. They actually may do repetitious traumatic play. So they take that trauma event and then they do it over and over again in their play. They may feel disturbed by reminders of the event. So if they see the person that abused them, if they hear something that's similar to their abuse, it could be just that little trigger that could set them off again. Nightmares or night terrors, concerns about safety. They may be very preoccupied about feelings of danger and anxiety. They may have a complete loss of ability to concentrate at school, which of course would result in lower performance. Then on the other side, they could be completely just like space cadet in dream world as a way to check out. Then adolescents, of course, as they get more complex, as their brains grow, then we have extreme self-consciousness. They may even reenact trauma play at their level that could be life-threatening because they're bigger. They're able to access more. They could be very rebellious at home or school. There could be an abrupt shift in relationships that they have in their social sphere with their parents, with their friends, with other kids. They could suffer from depression and social withdrawal. Of course, with all of this happening, they may have that decline in school performance, or if they were not such a great student before, they may hyper focus on school and that becomes their one safe thing. So an abrupt shift in grades up or down could be something to watch out for. Sleep and eating disturbances, including those nightmares and night terrors, can also be signs to watch out for in kiddos.
So one of the things we rarely talk about with ourselves or our children is the grieving process. We have been told for a while now that there are stages that you go through and then poof, you're all done. It's all better. In reality, it's never that clean and rarely goes away altogether. It's more like a wound that never quite heals. And if that gets irritated or bumped, it'll flare up again. That is the way that the lines in the second picture are thick and thin and go all around and swirl. Grief is not something that is linear. And we need to remember that when we are caring for ourselves or our children, this is especially important after the pandemic that we have gone through. So stress. What is stress? Stress is the body's reaction to any change that requires an adjustment or a response. The body reacts to these changes with physical and mental, emotional responses. Stress is a normal part of life. You can experience stress from your environment, from your body, your thoughts. Even positive life changes, such as a promotion or a mortgage in a new house, the birth of a child, those all produce stress. So, some of the things that we can do to try to manage that stress is relaxation activities. Try meditation, try yoga, breathing, tai chi, any sort of muscle relaxation. We live in a day and age where there are plenty of apps and programs online to help us with those if we don't feel that we are self motivated enough to do them on our own. Take care of your body each day, eat right, exercise, get enough sleep, help yourself as much as you can. Stay positive and practice gratitude. Acknowledge good parts of your day and your life. We tend to focus on the things that do stress us out and cause us trauma or irritation or upset for the day. Try to focus in on the good things and also try to remember that a bad day is different than a bad 5 minutes. You had one 5-minute item that caused you a bunch of stress and anxiety. That does not mean that your whole day has been a bad day. Accept that you can't control everything. Kind of find ways to go about your situations and find ways that you can change them if you can. A big one is learn to say no. That is something that people struggle with the most, myself included. Those additional responsibilities when you're too busy or too stressed, learning to say, no, I'm sorry, that's not something I can do right now. As human beings, we don't want to let others down, but no is a very powerful word to learn to say. And most off, just stay connected with people who help you stay calm, who make you happy, who provide you that emotional support and help you with the practical things in life. That can be a friend or a family member, a neighbor, someone that you chat with online on a regular basis. Anyone that can be a good listener and offer that ear when you need it, and can also, if possible, share some of that stress or those responsibilities when it comes about. So we are going to watch a video about stress and the stress response.
How often do you hear people say, "I'm so stressed out right now," or "That makes me so anxious"? How many times have you said it yourself? We often confuse stress with anxiety, and this confusion has led many of us to become afraid of one of the most natural and important states of our physical and mental health, our stress response. It seems to make sense that if stress is such a big part of our lives, we ought to take some time to think about what stress actually is and how we can manage it. It turns out that even how we think about the stress response has a big impact on how it affects us. Unfortunately, stress has developed a bit of a bad rap recently. And while there are certain types of stress that are not good for us, most of it is actually helpful. In fact, working through daily stressors is precisely how we build skills and resilience. It's time to start changing the conversation about stress. So let's say we have a big challenge in our environment, which is called a stressor. It could be an exam, a big assignment, or really most problems that we face. We start to feel the physical symptoms. They might be a racing heart, rapid breathing, body tension, or not sleeping. We're confronted by the challenge, and if we make it through, the stress response subsides or gradually goes away. Here's a map of a normal stress response. It may come on more quickly or gradually, but that's the general idea. The stress response is normal. It's actually our body's best effort to get us ready to face the challenges that come our way. Without some level of stress, we don't perform well. Same thing goes if we have too much. Now let's go back to when we first experienced the stress response. This is when we're at an important point where we can choose how we interpret those physical sensations. Let's call them path A and path B. On path A, we can think, "I'm so stressed out. I'm overwhelmed. Here we go again. I can't handle this," or "I'm not going to go." Or on path B, we can think, "My body's telling me I have something to face. This could be tough, but I'll find a way to get through it. My body's helping me to get ready to face this." These are two very different interpretations, and it turns out your interpretation of the stressor is what really matters. If we avoid situations or things that cause the stress response, it may make us feel better in the short term, but when we encounter the challenge again in the future, it actually makes the stress response even worse. On the other hand, if you think through what's causing your stress response in the first place, what strategies or problem solving you can use to face the challenge head on, it will reduce the intensity of the stress response. This is how we adapt and learn new skills to use the next time. Although the path B way of thinking may not come as naturally, and facing stressors takes courage, the more you practice this approach, the easier it will become. While the physical sensations of the stress response and anxiety are similar, the outcome is very different. The hallmarks of an anxiety disorder are persistent avoidance and withdrawal, where it causes major impairment in your life. That's more than just a stress response. So, putting this all together, let's start by labeling stress for what it is. A stress response. It's normal. It's a motivator. It isn't anxiety or depression. It's just stress. Next, check your thinking and try to interpret stress as helpful. I'm going to build some new skills. My brain is ramping up to help me get through this. Then, ask yourself, how am I going to step up to the problem causing me stress? What strategies do I have, and who can I ask for help? And finally, you may choose a helpful stress management technique, such as box breathing, mindfulness, physical exercise, or something else. But remember, calming strategies ultimately provide temporary relief until you're able to face the stressor. So, the more we understand our stress response, the easier it becomes to manage. For more information about stress and anxiety, check us out at teenmentalhealth.org.
Now we're going to talk about stress in the brain, and I have a big brain focus, as some of you know. If one part of the brain is engaged, there may not be as much energy for the other parts to handle their jobs, okay? So think of the brain as a computer with many moving parts. Stress on the parts versus the whole, okay? So let's say you've got the motherboard, everything else is working correctly, but the motherboard is overheating. That radiates outwards, right? And so it puts stress on everything else, especially if your fan's not working, right? But if you have a good fan, which is a good coping mechanism, that's going to keep that motherboard, not as hot, and that will not radiate stress then. So think about your brain as that computer and how the effects can include chronic disease, inflammation, and memory issues if it gets too hot, too long, too many times without an appropriate fan. Maybe the fan's not strong enough, for what you're doing, especially on a gaming computer, you have those high visuals, so something to think about. In the amygdala, that governs your survival instincts. And when you're under that stress, that part of your brain may take over, and memory and higher order tasks will completely suffer, completely break. All right. And so your survival instinct will come into play. And that's where you have that fight or flight or withdrawal. And so you could have all of those even sometimes happening. Someone can completely emotionally disconnect, but be fighting their way out of whatever is stressing them. So it's really important to remember, are you in survival mode or memory mode? And don't make any decisions while you're in survival mode, because you can forget or you can experience time lapses. And hormones can also change how our brain responds to stress, which is really, really important for moms and for growing kids, because the hormones are changing all of the time. And so how are you reacting to the stress? And is it because of, how you're feeling physically? Now, childhood stress is also really important to kind of focus on, because it can take a toll on that computer. All right. So if a child has repeated stress, complex stress, varied stress, it can actually weaken those parts so they don't fully develop over time. Resilience has generated new brain mechanisms to compensate, and that is why appropriate coping skills are so important, and processing any trauma that a child goes through. New pathways in the brain can help to overcome those stress-related brain changes formed earlier in life, which is really important as they grow to adulthood. So brain protection we want to give you. Limit those long-term intense stressors if at all possible. Those are the ones that really can hurt you. Focus on what you can control. And moms everywhere, we think we can control the world. We think we can control everything, and we cannot. Like like Lisa said, no is a very powerful word, and it's something that we do not know how to say very well as moms. So it's something to really focus on. Can I do this? Can I keep my promises? Can I keep my commitments on this without feeling like I'm going to die from stress? Okay, it's very important to remember that and to let go of any shame, fear, guilt, because you can't control that. You just can't. Focus on what you can control, which is your sleep, your diet, your health, your fun, what you do and what you don't do. And then we have some organizational strategies that can help. Self-care, it's so funny. Everyone talks, it's that big, golden word now, self-care. What does that mean? They have found in recent research that self-care that is actually just regular things you do in your life. So let's just say that you do your nails every week and you think that's self-care, okay? Well, it's just part of your routine. It's not actually intentional. It's not, you don't go into it with the intention of, this is making me feel positive about something, or this is making me feel positive, or this is making me feel rested. Intentional self-care is really important, especially as parents of kiddos with special needs. Really, really important to say, okay, I'm going to take a break from my normal routine and go get a massage. I'm going to take a break from my normal routine and go on vacation with my husband. I am going to take a break from my routine and go and do something that is different, something that is outside of the norm. That intentional self-care will give you more benefit than any other routine self-care will. Ask for help. If you need help, please ask for it. Ask a friend, ask a neighbor, ask a teacher, ask a church elder, ask whatever, whoever you feel comfortable with. And if you don't feel comfortable with anyone, ask a professional. Go and get help. Change your attitude towards stress. That is one of the things in our culture, especially in the US. We have this culture of stress being bad. All of it is bad, okay? But that's not true. Think about stress, okay? A birthday party for your kiddo, that is good stress, okay? An earthquake, that is bad stress, okay? So change how you perceive stress. Say, okay, this is a good stress. This is something that I'm doing for my kiddo. This is something that's going to be fun for everyone. This is bad, okay? And in Anchorage a couple of years ago, you all know what I'm talking about, okay? So bad stress, good stress, okay? Think about the store right before Christmas. That is overwhelming stress, okay? You can limit how much of that stress comes into your life, and you can leave the store if it gets to be too much. So remember, you control those stress pathways. There are some things you can control, like your kid is getting escalated, you can't control that, okay? You can help redirect, you can soothe, you can calm, but sometimes, it's just going to happen, so remember, what you can control and what you can't control. Yes, Elodia, for anybody, I like to read it just in case there's anybody who can't have access to the chat. I think people forget that intentional self-care doesn't need to be huge. For me, I take 15-minute micro sessions if I can't do something big, with a nice cup of tea or coffee, and my family knows I'm on a break. I read a book or watch something light and go into it with the intention to have escape time. That is perfect. That's amazing. So I used to do something when my kid was small, and I used to get bashed for it. And this was before it became a norm. I would take a mommy break and I would go on a weekend on my own. And I would go do something somewhere else. Okay. And my family, my friends, they're all like, and this, my son's 23 now. So this is when he was little. Everyone was like, you trust your husband to take care of your child? You're leaving your child? Mommies don't take breaks. This mommy had to stay sane. And so mommies need breaks too. So if you can't go away for a weekend, then try 15 minutes in your bathroom. Whatever it takes so that you have that intentional time where you don't have to think about anything else. So establish what you can do and what you can't do and change your attitude towards the stress. Now, we're going to do some self-reflection here. How do you know when you're stressed? These are some signs, and I think everyone recognizes them. We can all raise our hand for irritability and anger. We can all raise our hand for changes in behavior. We can raise our hand for all of these. Some of us have irrational fears. You know what? Speaking of irrational fears, I noticed something the other day. So since 2019, I've had a number of major surgeries. I was in a bad car accident and a whole bunch of other stuff has happened, the pandemic and everything. And it was so funny. Before all of this happened, I wasn't really keen on viscous fluids that come out of humans, but it wasn't something that was just like, and I've noticed since all this stuff happened, I literally shied away from changing the diaper. And I used to be completely fine with that. And so I'm just like, your tolerance level, sometimes your tolerance level just gets to a point where you're like, nope, no more. Recognize that and be okay with that. If you want to, get better at it again, of course, if, my granddaughter was here and I needed to change her diaper, I would make sure that I did it somehow. It might be tough, but, it's okay. If you get sick often, is that because you have 7 kids under the age of 14, like my friend does? Or is it because you are stressed all of the time? Are you getting all your responsibilities done, or are you so stressed you just can't handle anymore? Are you eating too much or not eating enough? Have you been indulging in substances of some kind to either relax you or as a coping mechanism? Have you started isolating from others? And can I just raise my hand on that? As Lisa would, that is my number one stress factor, or recognizing stress. That's what I do. I just kind of go into my little box because I have no problem being in my little box. So it's really, really important to look around and look inside of yourself to see what is happening and what is going on so that you can help cope with it. So now we're going to watch a video on coping with stress. You could brainstorm with your kids and add everyone's ideas so you could have something specific for your family.
Stress. Everyone experiences it both at work and in their personal lives. It's often caused by changes in the world around us that we can't control. But what we can control is how we cope with and react to stress. Let's take a look at some strategies for dealing with it. Make time for hobbies and self-care. When we're stressed, we have a tendency to focus on the things that are stressing us out, and we lose sight of taking care of ourselves. It's important to find some time in your schedule to relax or do what you enjoy. This can give you a renewed sense of energy and well-being. Use time management skills. There may be times where projects and tasks just start to pile up and you feel trapped under it all. This could be due to procrastinating or taking on too much work. Try listing out your tasks and prioritizing them. This can make it easier to get through them, and who knows, you may even find some tasks that are unnecessary or that you can delegate to others. Exercise. Stress often makes us tired and increases our anxiety. Studies have shown that over time, exercise can help to reduce anxiety levels and make you feel more energetic. Find an activity that you enjoy, whether it's walking, swimming, or something else, and try fitting it into your schedule a few times a week. Remove unnecessary sources of stress. While you can't control the changes that happen to you, there may be certain stressors that you can eliminate. For example, you could try limiting your access to daily news, spending less time on social media, or reducing the number of new projects you take on. While stress is inevitable, it's important to remember that there are always ways of managing it and improving the quality of your life.
One thing that I've started doing is, so my brain has a hard time shutting down at night. And so it seems like everything I forgot during the day seems to pile on me at night. And I thought of a trick, and it was so simple. I was like, why didn't I think about this years ago? Is I will literally get on my phone, I'll laying in bed, I get on my phone, I have all these things running through my head that need to be done, and I'll get on my phone and send myself an email with all of the to-dos that are sitting in my head. That way I can completely forget about them and know that they will be right there when I wake up in the morning. And I do this, for everything that I forget, if it comes into my brain, I send myself an email. That way I actually have a list ready for me to go in the morning, and I don't have to stress about it, and I can actually go to sleep. And that's a relatively recent kind of strategy that I've started using, and it's working fantastic.
So strategy activities, but what are some of the things that you do to cope with stress and kind of have a little bit of mental well-being? What are things that you do in your household? Things that I do, I like to take walks. I like to take my dogs for walks. I like to get with family and friends and do walks. Exercise is another good one. I find myself needing that more in the winter than in the summer. In the summer, it seems to come pretty naturally. I'm out and about. In the winter, it's easy for me to forget about exercise and kind of hunker down for the winter. Kind of some It goes with kind of some mindful movement, making sure that I remind myself that movement is good. I need to, if I have to, schedule time into the day to get it done. It doesn't have to be huge, like Alodia said. It can be 10 or 15 minutes, but that 10 or 15 minutes I know is time that I'm going to take a quick walk, and it's time that I'm not going to think about anything else. I might put on some music. I might put in some headphones and listen to a book that I've been listening to on tape, something that I enjoy, not something that I need to listen to for work or school or about my kid or anything of that sort. Another thing that's been helpful over time is recording anxiety responses. What are the things, kind of daily journaling? What are the things that cause me stress, that cause me anxiety? I had a friend that also got kind of into the journaling piece of it and actually started rating their stress on a scale of 1 to 10 every time. And that proved to be something that was very helpful when they later on sought treatment from a professional. They were able to give a very good, very accurate record of what was causing specific stress and anxiety, which was able to quickly pinpoint and get them some help. The professional was extremely excited about the fact that they had that record of what was causing those trigger points for them. And then kind of just some daily yoga or meditation, time to sit and think and be of yourself. I love it, Ashley. I like to walk my dog too. Also, we make a point to prioritize sleep, making sure that everyone is getting enough and that my husband and I have some time to unwind together at night after the kids are in bed. That is huge, 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 huge. Making sure that you have time for your partner and you guys are not all about the kids. That is something that often gets kind of pushed away, and it will create stress that you don't even know it's creating at the moment. So that's awesome. That is very, very huge. So a couple of things, like strategies, activities, I guess, that I have done in the past with kids and other adults that are reminders of. There's a straw activity. You can take a straw, and if you twist it from both ends, it'll normally bubble in the middle. I prefer to do it with milkshake straws or the straws that you get in the boba. If you go, it'll bubble in the middle, and eventually the tension on the plastic is so much that you can easily pop that piece in the middle. It's a very good reminder of how stress cranks down on us and cranks down and cranks down and cranks down until eventually we just explode. Something goes wrong, whether we get sick, whether we just fall apart. It doesn't matter, but that is a very good, easy representation. There are stress management, what are called thumb balls. They are soccer balls that are handheld size. You can toss them back and forth, and wherever your thumb or your first finger or your pinky or whatever lands on, it has different activities. And those are huge for doing, especially with kids. But I also find with adults, because as much as adults, we would like to think that we have it all together. I know I personally don't. And so it's a good reminder for me sometimes to think about those different things and to actively, mindfully think of those things and not just a passing by, yeah. And then plates is another one that kids and adults alike seem to enjoy. Writing down, I tend to go to the local thrift store. Everybody gets a marker. You write down all of the things that are bothering you, stressing you, causing issues in your life, and you can kind of toss that plate and watch it shatter. Watching that plate shatter is what's going to happen to you if you don't erase a few of those things off of your plate. So it is important to just be very mindful. So strategies for these mental wellness, we have radical acceptance, and that's completely, totally accepting something. And for example, if you imagine a tornado coming your way, obviously you can't do anything to stop that tornado. It's just not possible. But if you accept the fact that it's coming, then you can act and prepare and keep you and those around you safe. Deep breathing. You have breathe in for 5 seconds, hold your breath for 3, and breathe out for 7. So it's a 5-3-7 breathing pattern. And it is a quick, easy way. Spend 30 seconds or a minute to help calm you and refocus you. Opposite of emotion thinking, you can act in the opposite way your emotions tell you to act. So say you're feeling upset and you have the urge to isolate. Opposite to emotion tells you to go out and be around those people. So the opposite of action of isolation. The 5 senses, you run through what each of your senses is experiencing in that moment, and it helps you to be present in that moment. For mental reframing, that kind of involves taking an emotion or a stressor and thinking of it in a different way. And the emotional awareness, if you live in denial of your emotions, it'll take far longer to take care of them. Because once we recognize what we're feeling, we can tackle it and whatever is causing it. So if you're feeling anxious, let yourself be anxious for a couple of minutes. Then maybe meditate. If you're feeling angry, let yourself be angry. Then maybe listen to some calming music. Be in touch with your emotions. Accept that you're feeling a certain way. Let yourself feel that way, and then take an action to diminish those unhealthy feelings.
So we wanted to, you can of course use those strategies with kiddos as well, but we also wanted to give you some additional coping strategies for children and teens. Help them, close their eyes and imagine a favorite place. Did they go to Disneyland once? And is that their favorite place? Do they have, a cabin out at Harding that they love to go to? Think of that favorite place in their head and picture it. Help them picture it. Think of favorite things. Squeeze something like a stuffed animal or a fidget toy. Slowly say the alphabet and numbers. When my son was little, I used to sing the alphabet song whenever I was getting stressed with him. And he knew, he got to the point where he knew that the alphabet song meant run away from mama. Rounding with those 5 senses, like we talked about, doing a craft project and talking about the emotion while they're doing the craft project. Take a walk. Sometimes talking and walking can actually be really helpful because you don't have to look at each other. So being able to actually talk about what's going on without looking at each other can be especially helpful. And then of course, journaling or just writing it down, getting it out of your head. Yeah, it does sound completely counterintuitive, but I can totally understand listening to angry music while angry. Yeah. So I don't know, I am past my head banging years, but when I was a kiddo and a teenager and even a young adult, when I would get stressed out, I would turn on loud, I called it my thump thump music, and I would literally just go at it. So, sometimes that can be helpful too. So anything you can think of that will be helpful for the kiddos. And we did have a activity you can actually take and do with your kiddos. I don't know how old everybody is, but you may recognize this little fun paper thing that we all played with when we were children. Doing a stress catcher with your kid. These are instructions on how to do it, and you can you can customize it for your own family, which can be so much fun for those kids because then they have something to physically manipulate when they're stressed, which can be really, really fun for the kiddos. So we wanted to end with that. And we do have more parent learning hour classes coming for this semester. Next month, of course, second Saturday at 10 a.m. We would love to have you, and we're so glad that you were able to come today. If you have any questions, our emails are on the very first slide. You can always reach us. Thank you so much for coming.